Ditch Digger CEO, we've got a great one coming to you.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, there's not a better time in our history to have this conversation. When I look around and I talk to business leaders all over the country, the biggest challenge they have is keeping great people, right? And some of them kind of get it, and they're still having problems, and some don't get it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And and I can say I'm a person that didn't get it for a long time. I think I thought you pay people. You pay people decent, and you give them a job. They're supposed to come to work, and that's all. You don't worry about culture and values and all those things, right? But boy, today, if you don't have that, you're in trouble.
Yeah,
you're in big trouble. And so this good buddy of ours, yours and mine,
mm-hmm.
We've got today on Ditch Digger CEO, is one of the leaders in my mind when I think about culture and core values and building enterprise value in businesses based on the people, right?
Yeah.
And creating community,
absolutely,
right? And a family, right,
yep.
within your business.
And for me, when we started True Mentors, and you talking about servant leadership, he's one of the best that I've ever seen do it. We're blessed to have him as a true mentor, but more important, I remember sitting down with him, just telling him about like the goal that we have, and the first thing that he said was like, "Look, how can I help?" Like, he didn't say, "Oh, I don't know about this and I don't know about that." The first thing he said was like, "How can I help?" And he's been an abundance of help. A lot of the mentees have had the opportunity to meet this man. Literally is just like, oh my gosh, he just empowered me to the nth degree. So I am so excited for today and just have him as a close friend.
Yeah. So, and again, when you think about it, we in our businesses, we have multiple businesses. Some of them pay, really high wages. Some of them pay mediocre wages depending on what markets they're serving. But all our businesses are paying double to quadruple minimum wage, right? I would say maybe even 10 times minimum wage in some cases, right? When it comes to people working in the field, running our heavy equipment, whatever, right? They make pretty good money. And so for us, we still struggle with that. When you look at the hospitality industry, right, the catering industry, like Tom Walter, our buddy, is involved in here, man, how do you do it? So these are the questions we're going to get out of our buddy today, and and the world's going to hear. Now Tom is a person that I've seen speak in front of CEOs from across the globe. Recently at the Ritz-Carlton a few months ago, we had a big event, had a huge budget, and my buddy who ran the event picked Tom as one of the main speakers, and boy, they loved him. So we're blessed to have Tom here today. Tom Walters, our buddy. Welcome, Tom Walters, the Ditch Digger CEO, baby.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you, Gary and Quentin. I don't know if this build-up, whether I'm worthwhile. It's paved a hard road for me to follow here.
We know it is, and we're blessed to have you. So thanks for being here. We like to start from the beginning, Tom. So we'll get into all the different things in culture and core values, all the things in your business and how you run your businesses, and the entrepreneurial mindset you have, and you build in a lot of your team leaders and business partners, right? But we'd like to start from the beginning if we can. Where did it come about? Where did this entrepreneurial mindset of yours come about? How'd you learn all these things? And let's start with your upbringing first, if we could.
I'm one of 11 children. I'm the second oldest of 11 children, and our parents put us through Catholic schools, which means we didn't have enough money to eat properly. Yeah. So every night seemed to be boiled potatoes and stewed tomatoes out of a can, and rotten fish that the A&P was going to throw out. But through that childhood, I understood the value of morality and ethics. Those things were beaten into our heads, literally and figuratively. And behaviors within an organization. 13 members in a small house, 3-bedroom home. And then I left home when I was 19 years old because I just couldn't stand being confined, and I felt too locked in. So I left to go out in the world and understand what goes on. Before I started my first business, I'd been fired from every job that I had because I didn't like bosses. I didn't like people yelling at me, treating me like I was dirt. Most of them didn't even know my name. I thought my name had changed to Hey You. And there was no compliments. There was no job well done. So I had an opportunity to start my own business. I was a failure at school, too, and I ended up being asked to leave college after one semester. So I decided that academia was not for me, and being a worker was not for me, and I had a chance with 2 other guys to start a hot dog stand in Chicago. It was actually a suburb of Chicago, Niles. And I jumped at the opportunity. I went to my girlfriend, and I said to her, I dated her for a few years, and I said, I have this opportunity to start a hot dog stand. I need $5,000, and if you could lend it to me, I'll pay you back in 2.5 years, and then we can get married. So my funding request is a marriage proposal, but I said they go together. I need the money.
Now, you're how old at this point, 19?
I was 22 years old, I
Okay.
believe, 22 years old.
Okay.
And we started about 4 months later in Niles, and bought a partner out, and then we moved into a full-service restaurant. We opened up 2 more hot dog stands. Those were in Chicago, northwest side and the north side of Chicago.
Over a few year period?
Yes, that was over 3 years.
Wow.
And then we took our chance with a full-service restaurant. Beautiful restaurant. It was a former fast food restaurant that we remodeled, rehabilitated, and turned it into what's known as a Greek restaurant, full-service family restaurant without alcohol. That was my first business failure. Lost close to 7 figures in 1977. I lost a lot of money.
Wow.
And it taught me a very valuable lesson about life. And that was because I hired the best bartenders I could find. We didn't have bartenders. The best chefs, the best servers, best hostesses, the best people from a skill set. And my wife, who is a financial person, said to me, reviewing the P&Ls, she said, you're losing a lot of money. And I said, well, it's a new venture. And top line is healthy. The bottom line will catch up. She says, no, it's not going to catch up. They're stealing from you, and you're too stupid to know that.
Oh, wow.
And she was practical, and she was a financial person. And they were stealing from me, stealing a considerable amount of money. Everybody was stealing. It was a culture of theft. So the lesson that I learned was you hire people not only for skill, but for who they are. What kind of culture do they have? What kind of behaviors do they show? And so I learned about the value of culture. But it wasn't until almost 20 years later before it came to fruition that I really focused on culture. Then I went through some other businesses and got into the bar business. At that time, I was about 27 or 28 years old, and I have a problem with alcohol and drugs. And I woke up one morning, and my wife was crying, and she said, I said, what did I do? What's wrong with you? And she said, you don't remember what you did last night? And I said, I didn't hit you, did I? Afraid that I would have struck my wife, who I love very dearly. And she says, no. And I said, why don't you just divorce me? I'm not any good. And she said, why don't you go into detox, and we'll talk about it. And 2 o'clock that afternoon, she had me in detox. And to this day, I don't know what I did. She won't tell me.
Wow.
I don't want to go back to drinking or drugs to find out, but whatever it was must have been pretty radical.
And this was at what age?
27.
Okay, young guy. Wow.
Yeah. So, I was in detox approximately that time. I don't remember for sure.
And you were married about how long at this point?
About
5 years, 4 years?
2 years.
2 years, okay.
3 years, 3 or 4 years. And we had no children. We weren't able to have children right away. So I was rehabilitating. I read that Illinois had passed a law making 19 the legal age to drink beer and wine because of the crises from Vietnam. And I'm old enough to go die, but I'm not old enough to have a drink or vote.
Yeah.
To change the law to 18. Well, they made liquor 19, beer and wine. So my partner that I was still in business with, one of the partners I bought out, but the partner we're still in business with, suggested we open up a college bars. And so within a couple of years, we opened up 3 college bars. So I came home and told my wife, guess what? It's 19 to drink beer and wine. We're going to open up a college bar. I mean, that's like legalized drugs on a college campus.
Yeah.
And she said, are you crazy? I said, no, I'm not. Do you know how much money a sober and straight bar owner can make? A lot. And we did. We made a lot of money. And so we went down by Loyola University and was right by Northwestern at 6600 North Sheridan and opened up. But the Tribune at the time said it was the hottest bar in the city, hottest club in the city. And it was a stunning place. Stevie Ray Vaughan played there the first time he played in Chicago.
Wow. What was it called?
It was called, originally it was called Filthy McNasty's, and then it was...
That's a good name for it.
great character marketing, too.
Yeah.
Look. Yeah. And then it was Jawbones when it was a music bar. And we change it every 2 years, 2 or 3 years, so everyone would think it's a fresh new bar. Let's go try it out.
Huh.
And the last iteration, it was Cheers, and we put in a sidewalk cafe with 2 honey locust trees because they grow very fast. And it was about 4,000 square feet and oak floors. It was stunning, a beautiful facility. But it was doing very well, and my wife said to me, you don't drink, you don't smoke, and you say you're happily married. What do you like going to this bar for? Because she came down one time and it was filled with beautiful college girls. I was like 34 at the time, and I said, we're making a lot of money, aren't we? And she said, money's not everything. And it made me start to think, am I weakening my relationship with my wife? And so then one day, my son was about 4 years old, and I'm pulling out of my driveway to go. I was working from like 10 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the morning. And I would go to the restaurants. We still had restaurants. I go to the restaurants, and then I go to the nightclubs 2 nights a week. I looked in the rearview mirror of my car and saw my son crying in the driveway, and he was sobbing. And I stopped my car, and I went back, and I said, got down on my knees, and I said, what's wrong, Tim? And he said, how come you're never home? And as I drove into the city, I realized what my father had told me the night before I got married. He said, you're here on earth to get your wife to heaven. That's how God's going to judge you, not on how much money you make or what you do in business. And when you have children, you're here on earth to get your children to heaven. And unbelievably, coincidentally, my wife said after she had her baby, and Quentin, remember this now,
okay,
because you're going to be a dad very soon. Yeah. My wife said, why don't we make our vision in our marriage to get our children to heaven, and why don't we make our mission doing what it takes to get the children to heaven, give them that opportunity. So as I drove into the bar that day, I realized that my son was more important than anything else, and it was time to sell. So within a short period of time, I sold the businesses in the city, probably about 90 days, and opened up fast food restaurants in the suburbs, starting with Tasty Dog in Oak Grove Village. And through many other companies and businesses, we ended up, Tasty Dog became Tasty Catering, and that's where I am today.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we got here.
That's amazing. Did your son was 4 years old then?
Yes.
And he realized then, he could see then that he wasn't seeing his dad enough.
Yes, crying, sobbing. And he then, when he was 6 and 7, he would call me up on Saturdays at work and said, why don't you go home? We could do something, Dad.
Man.
And so I would get up from my desk and I'd go home.
So if you don't, what would probably be one of the biggest lessons for, again, a person who's starting a business, or just maybe not even a position where they're making $1 million yet, they're still just getting their feet wet, but they may have a family or they're out there really working hard. What would you see from those experiences, those shared experiences? Can you give us, like, look, if there was one thing you need to just kind of think about, what would that be? Just from the experience that you just kind of told us.
I think an entrepreneur, business owner that has a family has to make priority decisions. We do that in our professional life all the time. What's the most important problem we have? What's today's biggest pressing issue? And we anticipate this. That's what makes us successful business leaders. But in my opinion, I came from an unhappy family life when I was a child. There wasn't, we lived in abject poverty. There wasn't go to bed hungry at night. Fighting to get an extra piece of toast in the morning, physically fighting with brothers and sisters. And I wanted to just have a happy family. The thing that propelled me was happiness. And I have a new friend from Dallas, Texas that flew up on his Gulfstream last week. First time I've ever been able to take a tour on someone's private jet. It was very nice. And he came up to talk about, he's having a problem with his son. His son's about my son's age. And he is very successful, very wealthy, and he doesn't have his son. He's got 3 girls and a son is estranged. And I felt the pain. And as I'm driving him back to the airport after visiting my son and my daughter's businesses, he said to me, I have everything I need financially. I've achieved everything materialistically, and it cost me my son. And I envy you for what you have. And I said, well, I don't have your money, but I certainly have happiness. And I think, we have to make a decision as business owners. What is going to make us happy? And some people, I think, are sociopaths, but some business owners don't care about their families. They just care about the money. Well, God bless them if that's what drives them and motivates them. But why did you have to have family in the first place? Make that decision early. So that's my thought.
That's really good. Wow.
Yeah, well, and if your mission is to get those kids to heaven, like you said, well, gosh, if you're not spending time with them, it's not going to be very easy to do that, right?
Correct.
You're not with them enough. If you're not showing them, you're not leading by example yourself on a daily basis, then boy, that mission's not going to be accomplished very easily, right? So.
Yeah, and the beauty is, we have children, and Quentin, you're almost there, but to watch my son, who's far more successful than I am financially, to watch him interplay with his two young boys, 7 and 8 years old, I can tell that the most important thing in his life is his family.
Awesome.
And I thought, as a father and as a business leader, the one thing I did teach him is the importance of family.
Mm-hmm.
So I just spent 5 days in Wisconsin with my whole family, my daughter, my son, grandchildren, wife, daughter-in-law. And I sat there just observing and marveling over. I don't care so much about the businesses. That's like a game, right? Business is just a game.
Yeah.
You play the game every day, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but it's the game. And we have the disease. Entrepreneurs have a disease, and the disease is the thrill of the victories. But the biggest thrill of my life, I reflected on this, was sitting there saying, those grandchildren are laughing and being happy because of something my wife and I did. Actually, it was my wife's pushing to say, let's get our kids to heaven.
That's awesome. That's awesome, and for sure, if that's your goal, it's not an easy goal as it is, right? I mean, and when you look back, I look forward and say, someday I'm going to be in those last days of my life, and when I'm in that bed or wherever I'm at, I'm not going to be thinking about the plane I was able to buy someday, or the fancy cars I was able to drive, or the nice house I built, right? You're just not going to think about those things. You're going to think about your family, how are your kids going to be without you, your wife, how's she going to be without you, and will you see them in heaven? And those are things you're going to be thinking about, not the stuff, right? This stuff is all temporary.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't really, just like, the jet your friend has, that's pretty cool, right? That's a pretty cool, thing to be at a point in your life where you need a jet to fly around for business or whatever it might be, or for fun, whatever it is. But boy, if you don't have your kids, you're put on this earth to raise great people, and if you didn't do that, or you're struggling to do that, it's not worth it. It's not worth the jet. It's not worth the yacht. It's not worth any of that. So that's awesome perspective. So
yeah, there was an old man that told me early on in my entrepreneurship career. He said, this all comes to an end. We all die sooner or later. And the same thing you said about being on your deathbed, Gary. Think about what you want people to say in your eulogy. What do they want to talk about? How many cars you have, your yacht, your plane, or what you did as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And that propels me all the time. What do I want to be remembered for? What's my legacy? If you're going to spare yourself some grief and you're going to have a selfish moment, what do I want people to know me as? And, in the beginning, it was very important to have a nice car. I'm sure you guys know. When you drive around your friends, you get a nice car or a nice house, and invite them over to say, ha, 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 all my extra hard work is worthwhile. You get off at 5 o'clock, I work till 11 or 12. But that passes quickly, After a while, it becomes moot.
Yeah. No, I mean, most people would give back all the stuff for more time if they in that point in their life, right? When they're in their last days, most would look back and say, "Man, how much of that stuff would I give back for more time with my wife and my kids and my friends?" Right?
Exactly.
I think at most. So again, it's hard to look forward. You don't want to look forward to that day, but boy, if you do and reflect backwards, it shines a light on who you really want to be, right? So.
Yeah, and I think, as in work, I think in our families, if we're the leader of the family, if we're truly the leader, and we are leaders, we wouldn't start businesses. Eventually, I've seen some friends who are business owners and have families relinquish the family lead to their wife and then resent their wife because she's domineering and in charge. Well, it was up to you. You let her do this. You forgot what your role was in the marriage. It doesn't make any difference who's the dominant. But if you were originally the dominant and he's upset, it's your fault.
Yeah.
And then if your kids go away from you and they end up on alcohol or drugs because they're looking for love and they're looking in all the wrong places, it's your fault. Mm-hmm. It's my fault. Yeah. It's our fault as leaders. So I just don't want to have those regrets. If I lose money in a business, who cares?
Yeah.
I lose my child, my son, my daughter. No, that's not happy.
Yeah, nothing's worth that for sure.
No, sir.
So if you could, let's talk about the early days of Tasty Catering. How did that look? How was that going? You transitioned from Tasty Dogs to Tasty Catering.
Yeah, the split was caused because fast food became a red ocean, to use a term from about 15 years ago. The blue oceans, we went out to do something in catering because everybody was becoming a fast food restaurant. And Dick Portillo, I couldn't match him. At one point, I had more units than Dick Portillo, but he rapidly expanded. And he's a great man, and his company is my favorite fast food place to eat. But we realized that this was not growing, and it was so demanding. And someone asked us to do a company picnic, and then people asked us to do deli trays and box lunches, and we found out that we could control our destiny. We could control food costs. We knew exactly how much the catering aspect would be. So after 2 years of this, we branched off and started Tasty Catering. And it was a beautiful run for many years. And then during the slowdown of the economy, about 7 years ago, the National Restaurant Association talked to their members and said, you all should be caterers because there's a lot of money in caterers. And so instantly we had 2.5 million competitors. And now we have Uber Dash or Uber Eats, and we have DoorDash, and we have all these places that are encroaching in the catering market. And so we had to find a differentiator. So the differentiator from fast food became catering. Then how do we differentiate ourselves from all these other people that portray themselves as caterer? And that took a lot of time and effort to create a brand image that was unique and stood alone. And it was the work of our creative agency, New Fork, that only does caterers and venues all over the country, but they're specifically marketers for catering. And they came up with a very simple statement, and your people are your differentiator. And it's your culture that's the differentiator. And it was our people that created the culture after Cultural Revolution. So that's the path that we've been following to become a differentiator is the value of our culture and our people.
That book, Blue Ocean Strategy, I talk about every once in a while because it's one of my favorite little books that I've read in the past, and I've read it a few times over the years just to kind of just to continue to think what differentiates us from everybody else in the world. And it sounds like a simple thing, differentiation, but it's not. I mean, if you really put your heart into it, it takes a lot of work, and you'll find something that makes you so different that people want you instead of the other guys, right? Otherwise, you're in that red, bloody, shark-infested water, right? Instead of the blue ocean, swimming by yourself. So I love that book, and I love the fact you brought that up because it's one of my favorite. Anybody could read it and say, gosh, that makes sense. And it's not just differentiation in your business, right? It's differentiation in you. What makes you different? So your wife, when you come home, says, wow, I got a great husband. He's a little different, right? But he's a great husband. And there's why he's different. There's why I love him. I
hope she says that, Gary.
I hope my wife says that too. But no, she definitely says I'm different. Now, I'm not saying it. Maybe not.
She also loves you very much.
Maybe not always a good thing for her. But either way, I think that differentiation in all parts of your life are a big deal. Whether it's your personally, your business, philanthropic, whatever it is, right? You want to be different. Otherwise, you're just part of the crowd.
Yes.
So that's a great point.
I'm glad you mentioned that. What are some of your other favorite books, as long as we're talking about that?
Yeah, for me, I got
Business books.
I've got a lot of books. I don't read many of them, but I like the covers, and I do have a lot of books that people given to me. I have time to read on planes, so I'll read maybe a half a dozen books or a dozen books a year, something like that. But one I talk about also is A Startup Nation.
Yes.
I love that. That's a book I read maybe 2 years ago, and I'll go back to that every once in a while because it's a great book. It's all about this little country that with what was a couple million people, now only 6.5 million people that dominate per capita, the world of entrepreneurship and business and innovation, and that's Israel, right?
Yes.
So I love that book. I love to think about what we could be if we thought like the Israelis that had that goal of being the startup nation, right? And creating innovation and the best CEOs in the world, right? So that's a great book. But I've many books I like, but those two stand out through our conversation so far.
I think that's one of the keys for young people that they should ask mature entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that have made a niche that they want to emulate. So what books do you read? What was it that fed your thought process to become who you are? What was your influencer? What was your direct influencers?
Right.
So it's something I like asking business leaders.
We're asking you today now. So what's your favorite book or books? Besides the couple you've written that are excellent books. But
let's not talk about those.
Let's talk about what you like first, and then we'll talk about those.
I think customer service in a nutshell was a seminal one for how people expect to be treated. And I think that book, 1 Minute Manager, certainly had its mark in the 80s.
Yeah.
That was the hottest book of all. And people then stopped wanting to be an Oreo cookie. Someone said to me one day, I'm not an Oreo cookie, because the premise is be very nice to someone. That's the dark bottom. Then the creamy filling is the nasty things that you say. Well, you need to correct this and you need to correct that. And the final part of the cookie, the top of the cookie is, but I know you're going to be very good because you got a great future. So eventually, because that book became so popular, everybody became attuned to it. And they were saying, I don't want to be an Oreo cookie. Don't talk to me like I'm a cookie. Yeah. But Good to Great was powerful for us. Yeah. And it's something that our employees asked us to read and have the whole company read. And they built our culture on Good to Great. And the book now in my stage of this stage of my life is Finish Big by Bo Burlingham. How do we transition out? And I think every entrepreneur needs to start reading that in their 50s and understand the premises. So. And
that book, so Finishing Big, great book, and not only to sell someday or monetize what you've built, but also to replace yourself if you get hit by a bus. I mean, and not just that, but to create enterprise value in your business, right? If you're the only reason for the value, there's no value. You've built a job for yourself. I don't care how big the business is. If it's reliant on you, you've built a job, right? Compared to, that book talks about, transitioning and selling your business. But boy, my opinion today, and it wasn't, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, is build every business that with a leader that can be replaced simply, very easily. If it's you especially, right? But in every business, the leader should be able to be replaced. Otherwise, there's really no value to that business, as you think there might be, right?
Absolutely correct. And listeners, what Gary just mentioned is a nugget. He is so correct. And I think that's why Gary has started so many businesses, because he develops the leaders, not just the business. He develops a leader. And that's critically important. It took my ego a long time to realize that, Gary. You're fortunate because you're a younger guy by far to come up with that conclusion. And, right there is the foundation of why Gary Rebine is successful.
We're always learning. We're trying. We're not great at any of this stuff. But boy, if we keep trying and realize we're not that great at things we're talking about, we'll get better, right? So we've got great leaders in our businesses, and every one of them is striving to groom that number two. And whether they're there yet or not, they're striving to, right? And they know the value of that for themselves as well and their family, right? So. Yeah.
And number two is the key for number one's happiness. And if you don't develop number two, and number two should be developing number three. Yeah. And three should be developing number four. And if you don't have 2 or 3 layers of succession being groomed right now, you have an issue. You have a problem.
Yeah. That's like in Austin Powers. He had Mini-Me, didn't he? number 2. Oh, that wasn't number 2, though, was it? That was Mini-Me.
That was just Mini-Me.
He had a number 2 also, didn't he?
Yeah.
So, and I know your story briefly, but can you talk about the change that happened? Because when you started Tasty Catering, how was the culture then, and how was it? And then obviously, the story of, 2 people coming to you. But how was the culture before that happened? And then when that happened, what transpired and what implementations occurred in order to get you to some of the things that you have today?
I was the second oldest of those 11 kids. I was the oldest boy. My older sister fled to the convent and became a Catholic Dominican nun. And my father was a World War II Army sergeant, so he told me that responsibility has to be one of my major traits because I'm responsible for my younger brothers and sisters. And every time he would come home from work and they hadn't fulfilled their chores, I got disciplined. Because I hadn't learned how to be responsible for them. So I had to learn how to cajole, give instructions. And of course, in a family like that, for every action, there's a reaction. Every time I said, you need to do this, I'd hear why. I'm not doing it. I know Dad's going to hit you. So I got called out on that, and I had to figure out a way to make them work. It's also part of the reason why I left. I got tired of being responsible for 9 little snotty noses in full diapers. But in business, I had become my father. And I had become that person that I kept quitting jobs or getting fired from. Actually, I got fired from more. I think I got fired from every job. I don't think I ever quit a job. I think I just got fired.
Well, you weren't a quitter anyway.
No, I was going to make my point, darn it. I was going to protest, and I was going to let this inhumane treatment of your employees sucks. But it didn't get me anything other than fired. But I had become that, Quentin. I had become exactly that. I had become this tyrannical jerk. And I had two brothers who were my partners. Brother number 7, child number 7, and child number 11 became my partners. But it was my money because I had the long history of ownership. And so I had a clause put in our corporate resolutions that it takes 2/3 of the brothers, two of the votes to have something pass, and one of them has to be mine. So I had the nuclear vote. And so I was very content in the fact that I could call for a vote and it would go my way, unless they abstained, and then I just dissolved the company. But this power was because I wanted it to be successful. And I thought I knew better. Me and my 60,000 thoughts a day, I know things. And what I didn't know was what an idiot I looked like from the outside. I wasn't mindful. I didn't learn about mindfulness and positive thinking about who I am, critical thinking about who I am, until that fateful day of November 28th, 2005, when two millennials came to my desk and said if I didn't change, they were leaving. And I said, change what? They said, we don't like command and control. We're not going to work for command and control. And I said, what do you want? And that's where I got the introduction of the book, Good to Great. And we read that as a company. But that change happened, and it may become instantly. I mean, within that day, I became more reflective on who I was and how I appeared as a human being. Not who I thought I was, but how does Quentin view me? How does Gary view me? Versus what does Tom think about who Tom is? And, today, I don't look in the mirror as I walk in a building to see if I look good, because I know I'm old and ugly. But I do know that if I don't make eye contact, and if I don't listen, and if I don't hear what people are talking to me, I appear as a self-centered jerk. And so that's an example of what these young people taught me. And I became a servant to them because I realized they knew how to run a business better than I did. Actually, they didn't know how to run a business better. I retract that. They knew how to interface with people better than I did. And I've always considered myself an introvert. The back of my shirt right now is soaking wet from this interview and talking to you, this conversation.
And by the way, he does it all the time. I mean, he has to do this all the time.
And that's why I always wear a jacket, because the back of my shirt's dripping wet.
On average, how many? Not to get off track, but how many speaking engagements do you think you do a year?
Between 40 and 60, I think. I've never actually counted them, but I think maybe it feels like 100.
Yeah,
it does. It's a lot, but this change that happened then set the future. It took us a year to change, but my heavens, what an unbelievable change in relationships and in business and productivity. When I walked into your building today, Gary, I told a young man who I think highly of, who's interning with us, Joe Weber, I told him about how you can judge a company by their values. And if the values aren't displayed, and if the vice president first and I can't even think right. The vice president of First Impressions, who's your receptionist, doesn't know your values. The company's got a problem.
Yeah.
And we walked into the office here today, Gary, and Joe pointed out, there's the values. There's their values. And that's why I like Gary. And that's why I like everybody that works with Gary, because they understand the values. And I didn't know my values. And one of the things I tell young people when I speak a lot at universities, is before you go to bed tonight, I ask them to do 3 things. One of the things is write down 3 to 5 values that you will never compromise in your life. Understand who you are, not what you are. Who are you? And if you're going to be successful in life, you're going to write those down. And every morning when you wake up, as you have coffee, say those values. So it becomes part of your identity. And then people, business is 80% who you know and 20% what you know. And all things being equal, people do business with people they like. Right. So why don't you let the world know who you are? So I went on for a long time.
No, that's awesome. That's really awesome. And the thing, it took you a while. It took me a long time as well. It took me really. We've been in business for 30 37 years, 37 years now. And since I was 18. So when I look at my values today, right, they mean a lot to me. They mean a lot to everybody on our team. We talk about them a lot. We lead by them. We fire by them, right? We hire by them.
Well said.
But I didn't do this even 7-8 years ago. I didn't do that, right? We had them on the wall in a couple spots. We had them on our marketing, but it didn't really mean that much because we didn't live by them as well as we should have, right? So again, I think it's great for a guy like you that to be speaking to young people and young business leaders all over to tell your story, because how much more successful would you be today? How many more jobs would you have created? How many more good things could you have done if you had these values stamped in your brain and everybody that worked for you back 30 years ago, right?
You and I both know that answer, Gary. Significantly more,
right?
It's something that no one ever told us, though. We had to learn it the hard way, and then we realized the value of it, the importance of it.
Yeah. We originally thought it was just we better do this because it's good marketing, right? Mm-hmm. These big customers will want to deal with us if we say this is who we are, and we kind of are these things, we think, right? But if you're not talking about them, leading by them, and all that, you're really not. And so nowadays we do it, and boy, I tell you what, our satisfaction of our teammates here is at an all-time high. We make these different lists of great places to work and all that more than we ever had before. We couldn't ever even attempt to before, right? So it's a lot of fun, and by the way, it turns into bottom line as well, right? And you don't even have to think about that, but it turns into bottom line as well. You're not rehiring 30, 40, 50% of your workforce every year. What does that save you in dollars? It's huge dollars, right? You and I both know that. So let's get into these values of yours and how you live by them. How does your team think about those on a daily basis? And tell us about that.
Well, we hire and fire, and I'm so happy you brought that up. Firing based on the values. Everybody that's been fired in the last 10 years from Tasty Catering knows which values they broke consistently because they're written up for it and then they're terminated. And the last person I personally terminated, as I closed the door, he says, "I'm being fired because I violated this value." I said, "Yes, you are." He says, "Well, could I just retire?" I said, "Well, you could do whatever you want. You could quit, but you're no longer working here." And he called me back up a couple months later and said, "Could I have my job back? I realized now what I was missing." I said, "No, once you've been terminated, you're terminated." But I wished him well, and I tried to find a job for him because he was a good person. He just violated a value consistently because it was part of his behaviors. It was part of the way he grew up. Maybe it was survival mode, maybe whatever it was. I'm not a psychologist or a psychoanalyst, so I don't know. But we hire and fire according to values. And I knew nothing about values in 2005. And now I've studied so much about values because they made me chief culture officer, and I was in charge of this culture. And I found out that we all tend to hang with people, colloquial term hang, but participate with people that share our values. So when I was into drugs, when I was in my teens, and it was the 60s, the summer of love, and everybody's getting high, tuning in, dropping out, I was with all my druggy friends, right? And then when I got busted, I got arrested for drugs, and then I went to the drinking friends, and they were a different sort, but at least drinking was legal to a point. And then as I got to soccer with my children, I was with all the soccer dads and soccer moms. And we share these values, but it never occurred to me to build a business based on shared values. Never occurred to me because I was going to run that business like my father ran me, right?
Yeah.
But not the way employees wanted to be treated. And so long story short, after the conversion, we started hiring by the values and adhering to the values. And we repeat our core values before every meeting of 5 people or more, and we repeat all 7 of them. And it becomes conscious because we're speaking it, and it sets the tone for the meeting. Then it becomes subconscious, and it becomes subliminal. It becomes our behavior. Subliminal is the way we act. Mm-hmm. And, I liken this to when I was a Boy Scout. First of all, I'm a Catholic, so I said the 10 Commandments until all I remember is 6 and 9 were something about lust, and I didn't believe those because I was a lustful kid. But, I realized the commandments made me behave the way I was behaving. And then I became a Boy Scout, and I repeated the Boy Scout oath. And I used to do pretty well in repeating. I can't today. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty or something to God and my fellow man. So that's the way I behaved in Boy Scouts. And then when I got into AA, we repeated it before every meeting. And I know the 12 steps, step one is I'm powerless over alcohol. So I said that enough to realize I am. Guess what? I am powerless. If I don't take a drink, I have power over it. But if I take a drink, I'm powerless.
Yeah.
So it came to me one day when the culture wasn't developing at Tasty. Why don't we repeat these and repeat them and repeat them and repeat them? So some companies have them on the wall, but they never say them. And if you don't verbalize them, some of us learn through writing. I like to learn through writing because as I'm writing, I'm analyzing. Some learn through speaking. I'm not very good at that. I'm good at memorizing and repeating. But by having everybody in the company say it over and over and over again, it just becomes the way you are. And the funny part is, as you mentioned, Gary and Q, you mentioned that the marketing company, our marketing people market our values as a hook, an extra differentiator. But our marketing company, New Fork, was very clear about that. We are our values. Our values are us. They're inseparable. That's the way we are. So we started getting applicants because of our value. As you've done, you've done, Gary, you've won awards for your culture and your people. I'll never forget the day a beautiful young lady, very fashionable young lady, walked in the door at our office, and I sit right by the front door. And I greeted her, and she said, I'm here for a job interview with Tony. I'd like to see Tony Sansoni for a job as an event planner. I'm thinking, we don't have any jobs open. What's he doing hiring? So they went and met and came back, and she left, and I says, Tony, what are you hiring an event planner for? I didn't know we had any jobs open. He says, we cannot afford not to hire her. She graduated from the University of Southern California. She lives in Libertyville. She's an event planner. She graduated from a great hospitality management program. And she's heard about our culture, and she wants to work here because of our culture. And I told her we didn't have any job openings, and she said, I'll work as an intern, an unpaid intern. I just want to experience this
That's awesome.
while I learn hospitality management. And I said, we have to pay her because that's unethical to take her talents without paying her. So we paid her $15 an hour. 3 months later, it was Christmas, and we're having this great meeting about how we're going to handle all the Christmas crush. And it came to me that we hadn't hired Nikki full time. And I said, has anybody hired Nikki? No. Stop the meeting until she's on board. We're not going to talk any further. Get her on board. So this young lady came on full time at Christmas. In February, it was a terrible February, and we were, all of our hourly staff were at reduced wages because there was no business. It was snowing. It was well below zero. I'm walking out with Nikki. We're the last two in the building, and she turns to me and she says, Tom, why don't you just lay me off? Because I can live with my parents, and you can use my salary to feed the people that aren't working. I feel so sad about their families.
Wow.
And I gave her a hug, and I said, probably inappropriate to hug somebody today, but I gave her a hug, and I said, you're not leaving us. You're the kind of person that I want to build this company on. And I said, we need sales, and we need you. And so then she turned all of her energies into getting sales to bring these people back. The interesting part is I was gone for a while, and I came back, and there's another new event planner, and I knew we had a position open, but this young lady's sitting there, and I had lunch with her, and I said, her name's Michelle, and I said, how did you get here, Michelle? Tell me your path to come to Tasty. And she says, well, my best friend told me she loved her job, and I never loved a job in my life. And I said, how can you love a job? It's a job. And then she said, there's a position open. Why don't you apply? I applied, and you hired me. Your company hired me. I said, who's your friend? She says, Nikki. We've been friends since we were 5 years old in kindergarten together. And so that was just one small story about how culture attracts people, like-minded people, and it keeps them engaged. There's 4 elements to culture, why it engages people, it attracts people, and keeps that loyalty together. And so I'm very proud of our special event team. They're all young ladies because they design weddings very well, and they do. And they're all in their 20s, and they all have college degrees in hospitality management, but they're all same culture. Mm-hmm. Different ethnic backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, different personalities, but they're all grounded on that common denominator of culture and behaviors.
That's awesome.
So you say there's 4 elements of culture. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I was afraid as soon as I said that. You called me on that, Clinton. I'll do my best. I don't know if I can do this accurately, but one, it underpins competitive advantage financially because there's no time lost in hiring new people, turnover, training new people, all of those turnover rates diminish. And so it underpins financial performance. It attracts and retains top talent. People want to work with people that are just like them. And I just mean in behaviors. People want to work in a place where the people behave according to the expected norm of behavior. It's a differentiator. Other people in our industry might have chicken champagne and barbecue brisket and beef, but nobody has our people. And so our culture is a differentiator. And I think if you looked at the Wedding Wire and the Knot and Yelp, I think if you look at the reviews on Tasty Catering, almost invariably the first thing mentioned is our people. They have great staff. Their employees are phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And by the way, their food's good because food's expected to be good, right? You're a catering company. But what's not expected is that you have awesome people. And that's what the big shock is for companies. So I think those are only three, and I'm sorry, I missed the fourth one.
Can you say those again?
No, gosh darn it. Tried to escape on that one. It attracts and retains top talent.
Okay.
All right. It underpins competitive advantage. It's a differentiator.
Okay.
And it produces higher profitability. And the fourth one is higher financial reward. And the fourth one is that it engages employees and increases the discretionary thinking.